What if a single moment of heroism could rewrite years of heartbreak? Imagine a night like any other, suddenly erupting into flames, forcing a struggling father to rush into an inferno to save the children he never knew were his. As the smoke clears and the truth emerges, two worlds that were never meant to reconnect find themselves face to face once more. Before we dive into this extraordinary story of courage, second chances, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughters, take a moment to tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the scent of sawdust as Jackson Reed wiped his calloused hands on his worn jeans. The early morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Carpenter's Corner, the small woodworking shop where he had spent the last 5 years crafting furniture that other families would gather around. Mason, the owner, nodded approvingly as Jackson put the finishing touches on a handcrafted oak dining table. "Your best work yet," Mason commented, running his weathered fingers along the smooth edge. "Someone's going to treasure this for generations." Jackson managed a tired smile. At 32, his face already showed the lines of someone who had weathered more storms than most. His dark hair was peppered with premature gray at the temples, and beneath his quiet demeanor lay the weight of dreams deferred and paths not taken. "Hope so," Jackson replied, reaching for his thermos. "Bills don't pay themselves." Mason's eyes softened with understanding. Everyone in Riverbrook knew Jackson's story, or at least pieces of it. A promising architectural student who had abandoned his degree in the final year, returning to his hometown with little explanation and even less money. For years, he had kept to himself, working odd jobs until he discovered his gift for woodworking. At Mason's shop. "You heading home now?" Mason asked, glancing at the wall clock that showed just past noon. Jackson nodded, gathering his few belongings. "Mrs. Winters is watching the apartment until 3. Got to pick up some groceries before heading back." The apartment was a generous term for the 2-room space above Greta's Diner on Main Street. Jackson had converted the second room into a small bedroom, hanging colorful paper stars from the ceiling and painting one wall with a mural of a forest. It wasn't much, but it was home, the only home his 4-year-old daughter Lily had ever known. As Jackson stepped out onto the sidewalk, the crisp autumn air filled his lungs. Riverbrook was the kind of small town where everyone knew your business, for better or worse. It had its charm. The historic buildings lining Main Street, the community events in the town square, the way neighbors still brought casseroles when someone was sick. But it also meant living with whispers and sideways glances, something Jackson had grown accustomed to over the years. The local grocery store, Hammond's Market, was busy with the lunch crowd when Jackson arrived. He moved efficiently through the aisles, mentally calculating each item he placed in his basket. Ground beef on sale, store-brand pasta, a bag of apples that would last the week, a small chocolate bar, Lily's Friday treat. At the checkout, Mrs. Hammond herself rang him up, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "How's our Lily doing?" she asked, carefully placing his items in a paper bag. "Growing like a weed," Jackson replied with genuine pride. "Started asking about kindergarten already. That child is bright as they come." Mrs. Hammond nodded approvingly. "Just like her." "Daddy." Jackson felt the familiar pang in his chest at her words. If only she knew the whole story. If only anyone did. He thanked her and headed back into the autumn sunshine, grocery bag in one arm, his battered leather work satchel in the other. The walk to Greta's Diner took less than 10 minutes. The 2-story brick building had stood on the corner of Main and Elm for over 50 years, serving comfort food to generations of Riverbrook residents. The bell above the door jingled as Jackson entered, the smell of fresh pie and coffee immediately enveloping him. "There he is," called Greta from behind the counter. At 67, with silver hair pulled into a practical bun and reading glasses. Perched on her nose, Greta Klein was a Riverbrook institution. She had taken Jackson and Lily under her wing from the moment they had appeared in town, offering them the apartment above her diner at a rent that was well below market value. "How's my favorite tenant?" she asked, already pouring him a cup of coffee in a chipped blue mug. "Can't complain," Jackson said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. This was their ritual, a few minutes of conversation before he headed upstairs to relieve Mrs. Winters, the retired schoolteacher who watched Lily while he worked. Greta placed the mug in front of him along with a plate holding a turkey sandwich. "On the house," she said firmly when he began to protest. "You're too skinny." Jackson smiled despite himself. "You know, I'm perfectly capable of feeding myself." "Maybe," Greta conceded, wiping her hands on her apron, "but you're also perfectly capable of skipping meals to save money for that daughter of yours." Before Jackson could respond, the bell above the door jingled again. His eyes flicked automatically to the entrance, a habit born from years of watching shadows, and for a moment, his breath caught in his throat. The woman who entered seemed to bring a different atmosphere with her, crisp, polished, deliberate. Her tailored blazer and sleek dark hair spoke of a world far removed from the worn vinyl booths of Greta's diner. She paused just inside the doorway, surveying the space with a practiced eye before making her way to a corner table, her heels clicking authoritatively against the linoleum floor. "New face," Greta murmured, following Jackson's gaze. "Stopped in yesterday too. City folk, if I had to guess." Jackson turned back to his sandwich, focusing intently on the plate before him. Something about the woman had triggered a response in him that he couldn't quite place. Not recognition exactly, but a disturbance, like a stone dropped into still water. "You know her?" Greta asked, her keen eyes missing nothing. "No," Jackson said quickly, too quickly. He took a long sip of coffee to cover his discomfort. "Just not used to seeing strangers around here." Greta raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. "Well, whoever she is, she tips well. Left Molly 20% yesterday on just a coffee and slice of pie." Jackson nodded absently, finishing his sandwich in a few quick bites. He thanked Greta and gathered his bags, intent on heading upstairs without further interaction. But as he moved toward the back stairwell, he couldn't help but glance once more at the woman in the corner. She was on her phone now, speaking in low, measured tones, her back straight, her free hand making small, precise gestures. There was something about the angle of her jaw, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. Jackson shook his head, dispelling the thought before it could fully form. He had spent too many years building walls around certain memories to let them crumble now. The apartment was quiet when he entered, save for the soft sound of Mrs. Winters reading aloud from a picture book. Lily was curled against her side on the worn sofa, her dark curls spilling over the older woman's arm, her eyes wide with wonder at the story unfolding. "Daddy!" she exclaimed when she spotted him, launching herself off the sofa and into his arms with the boundless energy only a 4-year-old could possess. Jackson caught her with practiced ease, spinning her once before, setting her down. "Have you been good for Mrs. Winters?" "An absolute angel," Mrs. Winters replied, closing the book and rising slowly from the sofa. "We read 3 books, practiced our numbers, and drew some lovely pictures." "I made you something," Lily announced, racing to the small table in the corner that served as both dining area and art studio. She returned with a crayon drawing of 2 figures, one tall with dark hair, one small with curls, standing beside what appeared to be a large tree. "That's you and me," she explained seriously, pointing to each figure in turn. "And that's our house in the tree. Mrs. Winters says some people really live in trees." "Tree houses," Mrs. Winters corrected gently. "And I said some people build small houses in trees, not that they live in the actual trees like birds." Jackson knelt down to Lily's level, examining the drawing with exaggerated concentration. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This is beautiful, sweetheart. I think this is going right on the refrigerator. Lily beamed, her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, sparkling with pleasure. The thought came unbidden, and Jackson pushed it away with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been doing so for years. After Mrs. Winters had gathered her belongings and departed with promises to return the next day, Jackson set about unpacking the groceries, while Lily chattered about her morning. The small apartment filled with her voice, banishing the shadows that sometimes gathered in the corners when Jackson was alone with his thoughts. "Can we go to the park?" Lily asked, hopping from one foot to the other as Jackson put the last of the groceries away. He checked his watch. There were still several hours of daylight left, and the fresh air would do them both good. "Let me change my shirt, and we'll go." 15 minutes later, they were walking hand in hand toward Riverbrook Community Park, a modest but well-maintained space 3 blocks from the diner. Lily skipped beside him, occasionally tugging him forward in her eagerness to reach the playground. The park was busy with the after-school crowd, children racing between the swings and slides, while parents gathered on benches, chatting and keeping watchful eyes on their offspring. Jackson found an empty bench near the sandbox and settled onto it, watching as Lily immediately made her way to a group of children constructing an elaborate sandcastle. "Room for one more?" she asked, with the easy confidence that never failed to amaze Jackson. Where had she gotten that? Certainly not from him, especially not in recent years. The children looked up, considered for a moment, then scooted over to make space. Just like that, Lily was part of the group, offering suggestions and adding her own touches to the castle. Jackson leaned back on the bench, allowing himself a moment of peace. "Is that one yours? The little girl in the purple shirt?" The voice beside him was unexpected, and Jackson turned to find a woman had taken a seat at the other end of his bench. She was around his age, casually dressed in jeans and a light sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Yes," Jackson replied, his natural reserve making the word come out more curtly than he intended. If the woman noticed his tone, she didn't show it. "She's lovely. Jumped right in with the group. My son could take some lessons. He's the one, in the blue cap, hanging back by the swings. 4 years of trying to socialize him, and he still approaches other kids like they're wild animals." Despite himself, Jackson smiled. "Lily's never met a stranger. I keep telling her to be more cautious, but you're secretly glad she's not?" The woman finished with a knowing look. "I'm Rachel, by the way. Rachel Winters." Jackson read. He hesitated before adding, "Any relation to Mrs. Winters, who runs the after-school program?" "My mother-in-law," Rachel confirmed with a nod. "She mentions you and Lily often. All good things," she added quickly, seeing his expression. "She thinks the world of your daughter." Jackson relaxed slightly. "Mrs. Winters has been a lifesaver. I don't know what we'd do without her." "Single parenting isn't for the faint of heart," Rachel said, her eyes on her son, who had finally ventured closer to the sandbox. "My husband's in the military, deployed most of the year. It's challenging." There was something in her straightforward acknowledgement that made Jackson lower his guard a fraction. "It is," he agreed simply. They fell into a companionable silence, watching their children play. This was rare for Jackson, a conversation with another parent that didn't feel loaded, with unasked questions or hidden judgments. In the 4 years since he'd returned to Riverbrook with an infant daughter and no explanation, he'd grown accustomed to people's curiosity manifesting as probing questions thinly veiled as friendly concern. The peaceful moment was interrupted by a commotion near the slide. A boy, older than the sandbox crew, had toppled a young girl's bucket of collected leaves and sticks, scattering them across the wood chips. The girl's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes as the boy laughed. Before Jackson could even process what was happening, Lily was on her feet, marching over to the scene with purpose in her small shoulders. "That wasn't nice," she declared, hands on her hips as she stared up at the much taller boy. "You need to say sorry and help her pick them up." The boy blinked down at her, clearly surprised by the direct confrontation from someone half his size. "It's just leaves and sticks," he protested weakly. "They were her leaves and sticks," Lily insisted, not backing down an inch, "and they were important to her." Jackson was already moving toward them, ready to intervene if necessary, but something remarkable happened. The boy, after a moment of stunned silence, actually knelt down and began helping the crying girl gather her scattered treasures. "Sorry," he mumbled, not meeting either girl's eyes. Lily nodded once, satisfied, and joined in the collection effort. By the time Jackson reached them, the three children were working together, the crisis averted. "That's quite a daughter you have," Rachel commented, appearing at his side. "Most adults I know wouldn't have handled that so directly." Pride swelled in Jackson's chest, momentarily displacing the chronic worry that was his constant companion. "She surprises me every day," he admitted. As the afternoon wore on, Jackson found himself engaged in conversation with Rachel about everything from the best laundry detergent for removing playground stains to the challenges of explaining complex emotions to preschoolers. It was the longest, most normal interaction he'd had with another parent since before. When the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the playground, Jackson called to Lily that it was time to head home. To his surprise, she came without protest, her energy finally flagging after hours of play. "Daddy, can Emma come over sometime?" she asked, referring to the little girl whose nature collection she had defended. "She's never seen our tree mural." "We'll see," Jackson hedged, knowing full well that their tiny apartment above a diner wasn't exactly set up for play dates. "Maybe we can meet at the park again." Rachel, overhearing, offered him a sympathetic smile as she gathered her own reluctant son. "It was nice meeting you, Jackson. Maybe we'll see you around." "Maybe," he agreed, though both of them knew the realities of busy schedules and single parenting made casual social plans more aspiration than likelihood. Hand in hand with Lily, Jackson began the walk back toward Greta's diner, his daughter's steps growing slower as her energy waned. Without a word, he swung her up onto his shoulders, her delighted giggle the only reward he needed. "Did you see me stand up to that mean boy?" Lily asked, her small hands resting on top of his head. "I did," Jackson confirmed, adjusting his grip on her legs. "You were very brave. Where did you learn to do that?" "Mrs. Winters says we have to stand up for people who need help," Lily explained matter-of-factly. "And you always help people too, Daddy, like when you fixed Mr. Peterson's chair, even though he couldn't pay you right away." Jackson blinked, surprised that she had noticed that. "Well, sometimes people need a little help, and if we can give it, we should." "That's what I think too," Lily agreed seriously. As they approached the diner, Jackson noticed the same sleek car from earlier still parked outside. The mysterious woman must still be inside. For a reason he couldn't explain, he felt a prickle of unease at the back of his neck. "Let's go in the back way," he decided, heading for the side entrance that led directly to the staircase to their apartment. But as they rounded the corner of the building, Jackson stopped short. There, leaning against the brick wall near the side entrance, phone pressed to her ear, was the woman from the diner. Up close, the nagging sense of familiarity intensified. There was something about the sharp line of her jaw, the slight furrow between her brows, as she spoke in clipped, professional tones into the phone. "I don't care what the board thinks, Thomas. The acquisition is moving forward. Have the papers on my desk by Monday morning." She ended the call with a decisive tap and looked up, finally noticing Jackson and Lily standing frozen a few feet away. For a moment, their eyes locked, and Jackson felt the ground shift beneath his feet as recognition dawned in her gaze. Jackson? Her voice was exactly as he remembered it, though edged now with disbelief. Jackson Reed? Lily wiggled on his shoulders, sensing the sudden tension in her father's body. Daddy, who's that lady? Jackson carefully lowered Lily to the ground, keeping one hand firmly on her shoulder. His voice, when he finally found it, was barely audible. Hello, Olivia. Olivia Chen, the woman he had once planned to marry, the woman who had chosen career over family, the woman who had walked away from him, from them, without a backward glance. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the distant traffic and the rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. Then Olivia's eyes fell to Lily, widening slightly as they traced the child's features, the dark eyes, the determined chin, the curls that refused to be tamed, all mirrors of her own. Is she? The question hung in the air, incomplete but unmistakable. Before Jackson could respond, the peaceful evening was shattered by the wail of sirens, multiple sirens growing louder by the second. Jackson automatically pulled Lily closer to his side as a fire truck rounded the corner at the end of the street, followed by another, their lights painting the surrounding buildings in flashes of red and white. Something's wrong, he murmured, watching as the trucks barreled down Main Street and turned left at the next intersection. Olivia had already pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. There's a structure fire reported at Oak Ridge. Apartments, she said, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. Multiple units responding. Jackson felt his blood run cold. Oak Ridge? That's where Emma lives, the little girl from the park, he explained to Olivia's questioning look. Lily just played with her today. As if in confirmation, Lily tugged urgently at his hand. Daddy, Emma lives there with her sister, the sister who looks just like her. Twins, Jackson breathed, the pieces clicking into place. The girls are twins. Without conscious thought, Jackson was already moving, pulling Lily toward the diner's entrance. Greta, he called as they burst through the door. I need you to watch Lily. There's a fire at Oak Ridge, and I think a friend of hers might be in trouble. Greta, who had been wiping down the counter, immediately set aside her cloth. Of course, go. We'll be fine here. Jackson knelt in front of Lily, looking directly into her eyes. Stay with Greta. I'm going to make sure Emma and her sister are okay. Promise me you'll be good. Lily nodded solemnly, her eyes wide with worry. Promise, help them, Daddy. He pressed a quick kiss to her forehead and was out the door before he could second-guess himself. To his surprise, Olivia was right on, his heels. What are you doing? He asked, already breaking into a jog in the direction of the fire trucks. Coming with you, she replied simply, keeping pace despite her heeled boots. Those are children in danger. There was no time to argue, and truthfully no point. The Olivia he had known had always been stubborn to a fault. Some things, it seemed, hadn't changed. They covered the 6 blocks to Oak Ridge Apartments in record time, the growing plume of dark smoke guiding them like a beacon. As they rounded the final corner, the scene that greeted them was chaos. Flames licked from the windows of the 3rd floor of the building, thick smoke billowing into the darkening sky. Fire trucks had cordoned off the area, hoses already deployed, while police officers tried to keep frantic residents and onlookers at bay. Jackson scanned the crowd desperately, looking for any sign of the little girl from the park or her family. Finally, he spotted a woman he recognized as Emma's mother, her face streaked with tears as she clutched at a firefighter's arm. My daughters, she was saying, her voice breaking. They're still in there, 3rd floor, apartment 3C. I just went down to the laundry room for 5 minutes. Please, you have to get them out. The firefighter was speaking calmly but firmly. "Ma'am, we have teams inside right now searching each unit, but the fire started on the 3rd floor and the hallway is completely engulfed. We're doing everything we can, but you need to stay back and let us work." Jackson felt something cold settle in his stomach. 3rd floor, engulfed in flames, with 2 little girls trapped inside. Without thinking, he moved forward, ducking under the police tape before anyone could stop him. "Sir, you can't go in there," a police officer shouted, but Jackson was already sprinting toward the building, driven by an instinct that overrode all reason. Behind him, he could hear Olivia's voice sharp with alarm. "Jackson, don't!" But he was already at the entrance, pulling his shirt up over his nose and mouth as he plunged into the smoke-filled lobby. The stairwell door had been propped open by the firefighters, tendrils of smoke curling down from the upper floors. Jackson took the stairs 2 at a time, the heat intensifying with each step. By the 2nd floor landing, the smoke was so thick he could barely see. His eyes stung, and each breath burned in his lungs. But all he could think about was Emma, the little girl who had smiled shyly at Lily, who had cried when her treasures were scattered, who had twin sister he'd never met. The 3rd floor landing was an inferno. Flames licked along the ceiling, and the hallway beyond was a tunnel of fire and smoke. Jackson hesitated for only a moment before dropping to his hands and knees, where the air was marginally clearer, and began to crawl. Apartment 3C. He had to find 3C. The heat was unbearable, sweat pouring down his face, mingling with the tears his irritated eyes couldn't stop producing. A beam crashed down behind him, sending sparks flying. Jackson kept moving, counting doors as he went. 3B. There. 3C. The door was closed, but not locked. Jackson pushed it open and was immediately hit with a wall of smoke. Staying low, he crawled into the apartment. "Emma!" he called, his voice hoarse. "Emma, can you hear me? Where are you?" For a terrifying moment, there was no response. Then faintly he heard it, a small, frightened voice coming from somewhere deeper in the apartment. "Help! We're in here!" Following the sound, Jackson made his way through what appeared to be a living room and down a short hallway. The voice led him to a bedroom at the end, where the door was closed. Smoke seeped through the cracks, but the room beyond wasn't yet engulfed. Jackson pushed the door open to find 2 identical little girls huddled together in a far corner, clutching each other in terror. Their faces were streaked with tears and soot, their matching pigtails disheveled. "Emma," Jackson said, moving toward them, "I'm Lily's dad. Remember Lily from the park today? I'm going to get you out of here." One of the girls nodded, recognition flickering in her frightened eyes. "Lily's daddy," she confirmed in a small voice. "We need to go now," Jackson said as calmly as he could manage, holding out his arms. "The building is on fire, but I'm going to take you to your mom. She's waiting outside." The girls hesitated only briefly before scrambling toward him. Jackson gathered one in each arm, their small bodies trembling against him. "Hold on tight and keep your faces against my chest," he instructed, already turning back toward the door. "We're going to move fast." The journey back through the apartment was a nightmare of heat and disorientation. The smoke had thickened, and flames were now visible along the ceiling of the living room. Jackson held the girls tightly against him, trying to shield them as much as possible as he made his way to the front door. The hallway beyond was almost entirely engulfed now, the path he had taken to reach the apartment no longer passable. Jackson's mind raced. They needed another way out. "Fire escape," one of the twins whispered against his chest, as if reading his thoughts. "In our bedroom." Of course, many of these older buildings had fire escapes accessible from the bedrooms. Jackson turned and headed back toward the girls' room, fighting against the growing heaviness in his lungs. The air was becoming thinner, harder to breathe even close to the floor. The bedroom window opened onto a metal fire escape, just as the girl had said. Jackson set the twins down long enough to wrestle the window open, then helped them climb. through onto the platform beyond. The cool evening air was a shock after the infernal heat of the apartment. "Down the stairs," Jackson directed, guiding the girls toward the metal staircase that zigzagged down the side of the building. "Careful, hold the railing." They descended as quickly as safety allowed, the twins clinging to each other and to Jackson. From below, shouts and calls rose up as firefighters spotted them on the fire escape. By the time they reached the bottom, a team was waiting to receive them. "We've got them," a firefighter in full gear said, reaching up to help the first twin down from the final platform. "Are you injured? Can you breathe okay?" Jackson helped the second twin down before jumping off the fire escape himself, legs nearly buckling as he hit the ground. His lungs burned and his vision swam, but all that mattered was that the girls were safe. Paramedics swarmed around them immediately, placing oxygen masks over the twins' faces and leading them toward a waiting ambulance. Jackson caught a glimpse of their mother running toward them, her face transformed with relief and joy. "My babies! Oh God, my babies!" The family reunion faded from his awareness as his own condition rapidly deteriorated. The adrenaline that had carried him through the rescue was ebbing, leaving behind the full awareness of what his body had endured. His lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass, and the world around him was beginning to dim at the edges. Sir, I need you to sit down." A paramedic was at his side, guiding him firmly toward another ambulance. "You've suffered smoke inhalation and possibly burns. We need to treat you immediately." Jackson tried to protest, to explain that he needed to get back to Lily, but no words came out, only a harsh, racking cough that brought him to his knees. The paramedic caught him, easing him onto a stretcher. As they loaded him into the ambulance, the last thing Jackson saw before unconsciousness claimed him was Olivia's face. Her composed expression finally cracked to reveal something raw and unmistakable, something that looked remarkably like fear, regret, and a dawning realization. Then darkness swept in, and Jackson Reed knew no more. The rhythmic beeping of hospital machinery filled the sterile room as Jackson's consciousness slowly returned. The harsh fluorescent lights forced his eyes shut again, immediately after opening. Them. His throat felt like sandpaper, each breath a reminder of the smoke he had inhaled. As his senses gradually returned, panic seized him. "Lily," he croaked, attempting to sit up despite the protests of his body. "Where's my daughter?" "She's safe," came a gentle voice from beside the bed. "Greta's looking after her." Jackson turned his head, wincing at the pain that shot through his temples, to find Rachel Winters sitting in the visitor's chair. Her presence was unexpected, but somehow comforting in the clinical coldness of the hospital room. "The twins," he managed, his voice barely audible. Rachel reached for a plastic cup of water on the bedside table and carefully held it to his lips. "They're fine, some minor smoke inhalation, but they'll make a full recovery, thanks to you." Jackson took a small sip, the cool water soothing. His raw throat. "How long have I been here?" "Just overnight," Rachel assured him. "It's about 9 in the morning now. Mrs. Winters told me what happened, and I offered to sit with you while she took Lily to school." The mention of his daughter brought another wave of anxiety. "Lily must be so scared. I need to see her. To let her know I'm okay." Rachel placed a gentle hand on his arm. "She knows you're going to be fine. The doctors said you can probably go home this afternoon if your oxygen levels remain stable. You've got some mild burns on your hands and arms, and your lungs took quite a hit from the smoke, but you were incredibly lucky, Jackson." Lucky. The word echoed strangely in his mind. He didn't feel lucky. He felt exposed. In the span of a single evening, the carefully constructed boundaries of his life had been breached. Olivia was back. The person he had spent 4 years trying to forget had reappeared just as unexpectedly as she had vanished, bringing with her all the questions and pain he had locked away. As if summoned by his thoughts, a light knock sounded at the door. Rachel looked up and her expression shifted subtly. I should give you some privacy, she said, gathering her purse. The nurses have my number if you need anything before Mrs. Winters brings Lily by after school. She squeezed his hand briefly before heading to the door. As she opened it, Jackson caught a glimpse of the person waiting outside, Olivia looking uncharacteristically hesitant, a stark contrast to the confident executive he had encountered yesterday. Rachel slipped out with a polite nod, and for a moment, Olivia remained in the doorway, as if uncertain whether to enter. Her tailored clothing from the previous day had been replaced by more casual attire, dark jeans and a simple sweater. But even in this more relaxed state, she carried herself with the unmistakable poise of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "The nurse said you were awake," she finally said, stepping into the room, but maintaining her distance. "How are you feeling?" Jackson couldn't help but laugh, though it quickly turned into a painful cough. "Like I ran into a burning building," he managed once the spasm subsided. A flicker of something like guilt crossed Olivia's face. "The doctor said you have second-degree burns on your hands and forearms and significant smoke inhalation. They want to keep you under observation for another few hours." "So I've heard," Jackson replied, struggling to keep his tone neutral. There were too many emotions swirling beneath the surface: anger, confusion, a treacherous undercurrent of feelings he had thought long extinguished. "Why are you here, Olivia?" She took a step closer, her composure wavering momentarily. "I stayed at the hospital last night, after they brought you in." "That doesn't answer my question," Olivia sighed, finally taking a seat in the chair Rachel had vacated. "I don't know, Jackson. I didn't plan any of this. Coming to Riverbrook was a last-minute decision. The company is considering purchasing the old textile factory on the edge of town for conversion into a tech campus. I'm here to evaluate the site and meet with local officials. And the fact that I live here, that's just a coincidence?" Jackson's disbelief was evident in his voice. "A complete coincidence," Olivia confirmed, meeting his gaze directly. "I had no idea you'd returned to your hometown. The last I heard, you were in Chicago finishing your degree." The reference to his abandoned plans sent a jolt of old pain through Jackson. "Plans change," he said shortly. Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words. Olivia was the first to break it, her voice softer than before. "That little girl at the diner, she's yours?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "Or, yes, her name is Lily. She looks like you. Around the eyes." Olivia paused, choosing her next words carefully. "How old is she?" "4. The simple answer hung in the air, its implications impossible to ignore. 4 years, almost exactly. The amount of time since Olivia had walked away from their relationship, choosing a career opportunity in San Francisco over the life they had planned together in Chicago. Olivia's breath caught audibly. "Jackson, don't," he interrupted, the firmness in his voice belying the turmoil beneath. "Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're about to ask, don't. Not now." Before Olivia could respond, the door opened again and a doctor entered, clipboard in hand. He was middle-aged, with salt and pepper hair and the efficient manner of someone with too many patients and too little time. "Mr. Reed, good to see you awake. I'm Dr. Patel." He moved to the bedside, already checking the monitors. "Your oxygen levels are looking better, though we'll need to run another set of tests before discharge." Jackson nodded, grateful for the interruption. "When can I go home?" "My daughter, if the tests come back clear, we should have you out of here by early afternoon," Dr. Patel assured him, making notes on the clipboard. "Though I must emphasize that you'll need to take it easy for at least a week. No strenuous activity and definitely no more heroic rescues." There was a hint of admiration in the doctor's voice that made Jackson uncomfortable. "I just did what anyone would do." "Hardly," Dr. Patel commented, glancing briefly at Olivia before returning his attention to Jackson. "The Madison twins Mother has been asking about you. She'd like to thank you personally if you're up for visitors. Jackson hesitated, then nodded. Of course. I'll let the nurses know. Dr. Patel made a final note on his clipboard. A respiratory therapist will be in shortly to assess your lung function, and we'll proceed from there. As the doctor left, the tension in the room returned full force. Olivia stood, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her jeans. I should go, she said, not quite meeting Jackson's eyes. You need to rest, and I have meetings this afternoon. Jackson didn't argue. Part of him wanted her to stay, to demand explanations, to finally have the conversation they should have had 4 years ago. But a larger part was simply too exhausted, too overwhelmed by the events of the past 24 hours. Goodbye, Olivia. She paused at the door, looking back at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. I'm staying at the Riverbrook Inn, room 212, if you want to talk about anything. Then she was gone, leaving Jackson alone with the rhythmic beeping of the monitors and the chaotic tangle of his thoughts. The tests took longer than expected. By the time Jackson was finally cleared for discharge, the afternoon was well advanced. Mrs. Winters had brought Lily directly to the hospital from school, and her presence was like sunshine breaking through clouds. She climbed carefully onto the edge of his bed, her small face serious as she examined the bandages on his hands. "Does it hurt a lot, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small. Jackson managed a reassuring smile. "Not too much, and it's getting better already." "Mrs. Winters said you saved Emma and Olivia from a fire," Lily continued, her eyes wide, like a superhero. "Olivia?" Jackson repeated, momentarily confused, until he realized she was referring to one of the twins. The coincidence of the name wasn't lost on him. "That's Emma's sister's name," Lily explained, as if it were obvious. "They're identical, which means they look exactly the same. But Emma likes blue and Olivia likes purple." Before Jackson could process this new information, there was a soft knock at the door. A woman stood in the doorway, dark circles under, her eyes betraying her exhaustion despite her composed demeanor. "Mr. Reed, I'm Monica Madison, Emma and Olivia's mother." Her voice wavered slightly. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to thank you before you left. You saved my daughters' lives last night." Jackson shook his head, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. Monica stepped further into the room, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "But they didn't. You did. The firefighters told me they were minutes away from being able to reach my girls, minutes they didn't have." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I can never repay you for what you did, but please know that if there's ever anything at all that you need, you only have to ask." Lily, who had been watching this exchange with solemn attention, suddenly spoke up. "Are Emma and Olivia okay? Can they still come to our treehouse?" Monica smiled at the little girl, visibly touched by her concern. "They're just fine, sweetheart. They've been asking about you too. And yes, once they're feeling better, I'm sure they'd love to see your treehouse." Jackson winced inwardly, remembering that the treehouse was just a painted mural on the wall of their tiny apartment. But before he could make excuses, Lily was continuing with the unfiltered honesty of children. "We don't actually have a real tree house," she explained matter-of-factly, "just a painting on my wall. But Daddy says maybe someday we'll have a real one." To her credit, Monica didn't miss a beat. "Well, that sounds lovely too. Perhaps the girls could help add to the painting. They love art projects." The conversation was interrupted by a nurse arriving with discharge papers and final instructions for Jackson's home care. By the time everything was processed and a wheelchair procured, hospital policy, despite Jackson's protests that he could walk, Monica had exchanged contact information with Mrs. Winters and promised a playdate once the twins were fully recovered. The ride home in Mrs. Winters' ancient station wagon was quiet, with Lily finally succumbing to the emotional exhaustion of the day and falling asleep against Jackson's shoulder. As they pulled up in front of Greta's diner, Jackson noticed an unfamiliar car parked nearby, sleek, expensive, and distinctly out of place in Riverbrook. "Looks like you have a visitor," Mrs. Winters observed, following his gaze. Jackson sighed, a bone-deep weariness settling over him that had nothing to do with his injuries. "Would you mind taking Lily upstairs? I'll be up in a minute." Mrs. Winters gave him a knowing look, but didn't press. She gently transferred the sleeping Lily from the car and headed for the side entrance, while Jackson steeled himself to face the conversation he'd been avoiding. Olivia was sitting at the counter inside the diner, a cup of coffee untouched before her as she spoke quietly with Greta. Both women looked up as the bell above the door announced Jackson's arrival. Greta immediately moved from behind the counter, concern etched on her face. "Should you be out of the hospital already?" she demanded, scrutinizing him with a mother's critical eye. "I'm fine, Greta," Jackson assured her, though the effort of the short walk from the car had left him more winded than he cared to admit. "Just need to take it easy for a few days." Greta harumphed disbelievingly, but didn't argue further. "Well, you're not working until those bandages come off. I've already called Mason and told him so." Jackson opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. There was no winning an argument with Greta once she'd made up her mind. Besides, his hands were throbbing painfully beneath the bandages, making even simple tasks difficult. "I'll bring dinner up for you and Lily in a bit," Greta continued, gathering her purse from beneath the counter. "Meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and don't even think about trying to pay me back." With that, she bustled out, leaving Jackson alone with Olivia. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Olivia gestured to the stool beside her. "You look like you're about to fall over." Jackson hesitated before taking the offered seat, careful to maintain some distance between them. Up close, he could see the toll the past 24 hours had taken on her as well. The slight smudge of her usually perfect makeup, the tension in her shoulders. "What do you want, Olivia?" he asked quietly, too exhausted for pretense. She turned her coffee cup slowly between her hands, her gaze fixed on its contents. "Is she mine?" The directness of the question shouldn't have surprised him. Olivia had never been one to dance around difficult subjects. "Yes." The simple admission seemed to physically affect her. Olivia closed her eyes briefly, her knuckles whitening around the coffee cup. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jackson felt a flash of anger cut through his exhaustion. "Tell you? How exactly was I supposed to do that, Olivia? You made it very clear when you left that you didn't want to be contacted. You changed your number, your email, you cut off every mutual friend we had. I didn't know you were going to be a father," she countered, meeting his gaze directly now. "If I had known—" "What?" Jackson interrupted, his voice low but intense. "What would you have done differently? You made your choice. Your career came first. It always did." Olivia flinched as if he had struck her. "That's not fair, isn't it?" The bitterness Jackson had carried for 4 years rose to the surface. "You had an opportunity in San Francisco, a once-in-a-lifetime chance, you called it. And suddenly, all our plans, the wedding, the future we had mapped out, none of it mattered anymore." "I asked you to come with me," Olivia reminded him, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. 3 days before you were set to leave," Jackson shot back. "After you had already accepted the position, after you had already found an apartment. You didn't ask me to be part of the decision, Olivia. You presented me with a fait accompli and expected me to just fall in line." The truth of his words hung heavy between them. Jackson hadn't realized how much resentment he still carried until he found himself voicing it aloud. "I was going to finish my degree," he continued more quietly. "I had 1 semester left, and then I found out you were pregnant. Olivia's eyes widened. After I left. Jackson nodded, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustrated remembrance. About a week after. At first I tried to contact you. Called your new office, your new cell, when I finally got the number from a mutual friend. Left messages that were never returned. I never got any messages about a baby, Olivia said, her voice hollow. Because I never specifically mentioned it, Jackson admitted. I was angry, hurt. I thought you were deliberately ignoring me. And then I started thinking about what kind of life we would have. Me finishing school, starting at an entry-level position in architecture, you climbing the corporate ladder 3,000 miles away, a child caught in the middle. He sighed heavily. It didn't seem fair to any of us. So you decided to raise her alone, without even giving me the chance to be involved? There was a rising note of incredulity in Olivia's voice. I decided to give her stability, Jackson corrected. One parent who was fully present, instead of being shuttled back and forth across the country between two people who couldn't make it work. That wasn't your decision to make alone, Jackson, Olivia said quietly. But there was a new understanding in her eyes, a recognition of the complexities involved. Before Jackson could respond, the side door opened again and Mrs. Winters appeared. Her expression apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Lily's awake and asking for you, Jackson. She's a bit upset to find herself upstairs without you. Jackson immediately stood, wincing as the movement pulled at his injuries. I'll be right up. Mrs. Winters nodded and disappeared back into the stairwell. Jackson turned to Olivia, who had also risen from her seat. I have to go. I know. She hesitated, then added, This conversation isn't over, Jackson. I'd like to meet her, properly. Jackson felt a surge of protective instinct. She doesn't know about you. She thinks her biological mother isn't in the picture. Isn't that essentially the truth? Olivia pointed out, a hint of her usual sharpness returning. I haven't been in the picture, but I'm here now. For how long? Jackson challenged. Until your evaluation of the factory site is complete? Until the next big career opportunity calls you away? Lily isn't a business project you can parachute into and out of as it suits your schedule. The words were harsh, but Jackson couldn't bring himself to care. 4 years of single parenthood, the sleepless nights, the financial struggles, the constant worry had earned him the right to protect his daughter from unnecessary pain. Olivia's expression hardened, the vulnerability of moments ago replaced by the composed mask he remembered all too well. You think that's what this is to me? Just another item on my to-do list? I think you've been gone for 4 years and now you're back for what? A few days? A week? Jackson shook his head. I need to go to my daughter. Without waiting for a response, he turned and made his way to the side door. Each step an effort as fatigue and pain caught up with him. He could feel Olivia's eyes on his back but didn't turn around. There was nothing more to say, at least not today, not in his current state. Upstairs, Lily was sitting on the sofa, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her arms. Her face lit up when Jackson entered, though concern quickly followed. You look tired, Daddy, she observed, scooching over to make room for him. Jackson eased himself onto the sofa with a grateful sigh. Just a little, sweet pea. It's been a long day. Mrs. Winters, who had been tidying the kitchenette, approached with a glass of water and the pain medication the hospital had prescribed. I'll leave you two to rest. Greta said she'll be up with dinner soon. After she had gone, Lily curled carefully against Jackson's side, mindful of his bandaged hands. Are you still a superhero even when you're tired? She asked, her voice serious. Jackson chuckled softly. I'm not a superhero, Lily. I just did what needed to be done. Like when you fixed Mrs. Peterson's leaky sink for free because her husband is sick. Something like that, Jackson agreed, touched that she remembered these small acts of kindness. Lily nodded, satisfied with this explanation. The lady downstairs looked sad, she observed unexpectedly. Jackson tensed slightly. What lady? The one with the fancy shoes. She came in yesterday when we were at the park. Greta told her you weren't working. So Olivia had been looking for him even before the fire. The realization added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. Why did she look sad, do you think? Jackson asked carefully, unsure how much Lily had picked up on. Lily considered this with the thoughtful seriousness only children can muster. Maybe she lost something important. That's what makes me sad sometimes. Out of the mouths of babes, Jackson thought, a lump forming in his throat. Maybe, he acknowledged softly. They lapsed into silence, Lily eventually drifting off again, her small body warm against his side. Jackson remained awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind a whirlwind of memories and questions. Had he done the right thing 4 years ago? At the time, it had seemed the only possible choice. Olivia had made her priorities clear. He had been angry, yes, but also practical. A long-distance relationship was difficult enough without adding a child to the equation. And the thought of Lily growing up, divided between 2 households, 2 coasts, never fully belonging in either place. He couldn't bear it. The sound of soft knocking roused him from his thoughts. Carefully extracting himself from Lily's sleeping form, Jackson made his way to the door, expecting Greta with the promised dinner. Instead, he found Monica Madison standing in the hallway, a covered dish in her hands, 2 identical little girls peering shyly from behind her legs. "I hope we're not intruding," Monica said quickly, noting his surprised expression. "The diner owner, Greta, she mentioned you lived up here and suggested we might bring dinner over as a small thank you." "That wasn't necessary," Jackson began, but Monica shook her head firmly. "Please, it would mean a lot to us." She held out the dish. "It's just lasagna, nothing fancy, but it's homemade." One of the twins, Jackson couldn't tell if it was Emma or Olivia, stepped forward, clutching a handmade card. "We made this for you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson knelt down to her level, ignoring the protest from his aching body. "Thank you," he said gravely, accepting the card with its colorful crayon drawing of what appeared to be a stick figure carrying 2 smaller figures out of a red and orange blaze. "This is beautiful." The other twin stepped forward as well, slightly bolder than her sister. "Are you really Lily's daddy? She told us you build things." "I am, and I do," Jackson confirmed, smiling at the directness of the question. "She's sleeping right now, but I know she'd love to see you both when she wakes up." "Maybe another day," Monica interjected gently. "We should let Mr. Reed rest now, girls." The twins nodded solemnly in unison, a gesture so synchronized it was almost uncanny. As they turned to leave, the bolder of the 2 looked back over her shoulder. "Thank you for saving us," she said simply, with the unvarnished honesty of childhood. Jackson felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with smoke inhalation. "You're very welcome." After they had gone, he stood in the doorway for a long moment, the warmth of the dish seeping through the bandages on his hands, the crayon drawing clutched carefully in his fingers. The last 24 hours had turned his carefully ordered world upside down, bringing back a past he had thought safely buried and confronting him with choices he had never expected to face again. Yet amidst all the turmoil, there was this: the simple gratitude of children, the warmth of community, the knowledge that when it had truly mattered, he had done the right thing without hesitation. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring with Olivia's return, tonight there was lasagna to be shared with his daughter, a crayon drawing to be proudly displayed on the refrigerator, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that 2 little girls would grow up because he had acted when action was needed. For now, that would have to be enough. Morning arrived with a clarity that seemed almost surreal after the chaos of the previous days. Sunlight streamed through the apartment's small windows, falling in warm patches across the worn wooden floor. Lily was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug in the living room, carefully coloring a picture with focused intensity. Jackson watched her from the doorway of his bedroom, struck anew by how much she resembled her mother. It wasn't just the dark eyes or the determined set of her mouth when she concentrated. It was something more essential, an innate confidence that radiated from her even at 4 years old. "Morning, sunshine," he said softly, making his way into the living room. Lily looked up, her face breaking into a smile. "Daddy, look what I'm making for Emma and Olivia." She held up her drawing, 3 little girls holding hands beneath what appeared to be a very large tree. "It's beautiful," Jackson told her honestly, easing himself onto the sofa. His body felt like one massive bruise, and his hands throbbed beneath their bandages. "What's the special occasion?" "It's a thank you card," Lily explained, returning to her coloring. "For the lasagna. It was way better than Mrs. Winter's casserole." She wrinkled her nose slightly at the mention of their neighbor's notoriously bland cooking. Jackson chuckled despite himself. "Don't let Mrs. Winters hear you say that." He glanced at the clock on the wall and frowned slightly. "Shouldn't you be getting ready for school? It's almost 8:30. Lily shook her head, not looking up from her drawing. "Greta said I could stay home today to take care of you. She called the school and everything." Jackson opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. The truth was, he was grateful for the company, the thought of spending the day alone with his thoughts that inevitably circled back to Olivia and the unresolved questions between them, was less than appealing. "Well, in that case," he said instead, "how about we have breakfast? I think I can manage to pour cereal one-handed." Lily giggled, setting aside her crayons. "Greta already brought breakfast. It's in the kitchen. She said to tell you there's coffee in the pot and not to touch the orange juice because there's medicine in it for you." Sure enough, the small kitchen counter held a tray with covered plates, a glass of orange juice that looked suspiciously darker than usual, and a small pot of coffee. Jackson sent a silent thank you to Greta, whose motherly instincts never seemed to fail. After breakfast, which Lily insisted on helping him with, "Because your hands are all wrapped up like a mummy, Daddy," they settled into a quiet morning routine. Jackson found he could manage some light housekeeping with Lily's enthusiastic, if not entirely effective assistance, and they spent an hour going through her picture books, Lily reading the ones she had memorized while Jackson turned the pages. It was nearly noon when a knock at the door interrupted their peaceful domesticity. Lily scrambled up from the floor, always eager for visitors, but Jackson placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let me see who it is first, sweet pea." The caution was unnecessary. When Jackson opened the door, he found Rachel Winters standing in the hallway, a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder. "Hope I'm not intruding," she said with a warm smile. "I brought lunch and some burn ointment my mother-in-law swears by." "Rachel!" Lily exclaimed, darting forward to hug the woman's legs. "Did you bring Toby too?" Her eyes searched the hallway for Rachel's shy son. Rachel laughed, returning Lily's hug. "Not today, sweetheart, he's at school, but he did help me pick out a surprise for you." She reached into her tote bag and produced a small, colorfully wrapped package. Lily's eyes widened. "For me?" "Really?" "Really?" Rachel confirmed, handing it to her. "Why don't you open it while I help your dad with lunch?" As Lily settled onto the sofa with her unexpected gift, Rachel followed Jackson into the kitchen area, speaking in a low voice. "How are you really doing?" she asked, her expression concerned as she took in his bandaged hands and the visible fatigue in his face. Jackson sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, I don't know. Physically, I've been better, but it's everything else that's..." He trailed off, unsure how to articulate the emotional whirlwind of the past 2 days. Rachel began unpacking her tote bag, revealing containers of homemade soup and freshly baked bread. "Mrs. Winters mentioned you had a visitor yesterday. Someone from your past?" "News travels fast," Jackson observed wryly. "Small town," Rachel replied with a shrug, though for what it's worth, she only mentioned it because she was concerned about you. Said you looked like you'd seen a ghost. "That's not far off," Jackson admitted. He hesitated, then added, "Olivia, the woman who came by, she's Lily's mother." Rachel's hands stilled momentarily, surprise flickering across her face before she carefully schooled her expression. "I see. And she's just now showing up?" "It's complicated," Jackson said, not ready to delve into the full history. "She didn't know about Lily until yesterday." Rachel raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, she began setting out bowls for the soup, moving around Jackson's small kitchen with the ease of someone used to finding her way in unfamiliar spaces. "Well, whatever the situation, you've got friends here," she said simply. "Mrs. Winters, Greta, me. We're all in your corner." The declaration, offered so plainly, took Jackson by surprise. He had become so accustomed to handling everything alone that the reminder of the community that had formed around him and Lily was unexpectedly moving. "Thank you," he said, the words inadequate to express his gratitude. From the living room came Lily's delighted exclamation. "Daddy, look! It's a fairy garden kit, with real plants and tiny furniture and everything." The moment of vulnerability passed as Jackson turned his attention to his daughter, who was already emptying the contents of her gift onto the coffee table with enthusiastic abandon. Rachel caught his eye over Lily's head, her smile understanding. The unspoken message was clear. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he wouldn't have to face them alone. Evening settled over Riverbrook like a soft blanket, street lamps flickering. To life along Main Street as storefronts closed for the day. In the quiet apartment above Greta's diner, Lily had finally fallen asleep after an extended negotiation involving 2 bedtime stories, a glass of water, and solemn promises that her newly acquired fairy garden kit would still be there in the morning. Jackson sat at the small kitchen table, idly turning his phone between his uninjured fingers. 2 missed calls from an unknown number glowed on the screen. He didn't need to guess who they were from. Olivia had always been persistent when she wanted something, and now what she wanted was access to the daughter she had just discovered existed. The sound of footsteps on the exterior staircase pulled Jackson from his thoughts. A moment later, a soft knock at the door confirmed he had a late visitor. Rising stiffly, his body still protesting from the exertions of the fire rescue, Jackson made his way to the door and opened it to find Mason standing on the landing, cap in hand. "Evening, Jack," the older man greeted him, voice lowered in deference. "To the late hour. Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," Jackson assured him, stepping back to allow his employer inside. "Just got Lily down for the night." Mason nodded, entering with the careful movements of someone unused to being in small living spaces. His eyes immediately took in the bandages on Jackson's hands and the lingering fatigue in his face. "Brought you something," Mason said, holding out a small jar. "Salve for those burns. Old family recipe. Works better than anything you'll get at a pharmacy." Jackson accepted the jar with a grateful nod. "Thanks. Doctor says they're healing well, but they still sting like hell, pardon my language." Mason waved away the apology, settling himself at the kitchen table without waiting for an invitation. "Heard what happened. Whole town's talking about it, running into a burning building to save those girls." He shook his head, impressed. "Takes a special kind of courage." Uncomfortable with the praise, Jackson busied himself making coffee. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Mason said firmly. "They wouldn't have, but that's not why I'm here." Jackson glanced over, curious. "Oh?" "Shop's been busy. Got that custom dining set for the Hendersons due next week, and that display cabinet for the library fundraiser." Mason picked up Jackson's phone, which was still showing the missed calls, and set it aside. "Can't finish them without my best craftsman." "I'll be back as soon as the bandages come off," Jackson promised, setting a mug of coffee in front of Mason before taking a seat opposite him. "Doctor says another week, maybe less." Mason shook his head again. "Not rushing you back? Came to propose something else?" He took a sip of coffee, his weathered face thoughtful. "You know, I've been thinking about expanding the shop, moving to that bigger space over on Elm Street." Jackson nodded. It had been a topic of conversation at Carpenter's corner for months, though Mason had been hesitant to commit to the larger overhead. "Well, I made an offer yesterday. Owner accepted this morning." "That's great news," Jackson said genuinely, pleased for his mentor. "The extra space will be perfect for the larger commissions we've been turning down." "It will," Mason agreed. "But I'm going to need help running the place, more than just another pair of hands. Someone who knows the business, has an eye for design, can talk to clients." He fixed Jackson with a steady gaze. "Been thinking you're wasted just building furniture, Jack. You've got the training for more. That architectural degree you never finished?" Jackson tensed slightly. It was a long time ago. 4 years. Isn't that long? Mason countered mildly. And talent doesn't disappear just because you put it on a shelf for a while. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper, sliding it across the table. "This is what I'm offering. Junior partner, salary instead of hourly, health insurance for you and Lily." Stunned, Jackson unfolded the paper. The figure written there was nearly double what he currently earned. "I can't accept this," he said, automatically looking up at Mason. "It's too generous." "It's not charity," Mason replied firmly. "It's business. I'm not getting any younger, and I need someone I can trust to help grow the shop. Someone who can eventually take over when I retire." He tapped the paper with one calloused finger. "Think about it. Not just for yourself, but for Lily too." The mention of his daughter drove home the opportunity being presented. A stable income, benefits, the chance to use the design skills he had once been passionate about. "Why now?" Jackson asked, unable to keep the suspicion from his voice. The timing seemed too convenient to be coincidental. Mason shrugged, unperturbed. "Been thinking about it for a while. But seeing you risk your life for those kids made me realize life's too short to keep putting important decisions off." He drained his coffee and stood. "Take a few days. Talk to the bank about a loan for your share if you need to. But I want you on board, Jack. The shop needs you." After Mason left, Jackson remained at the kitchen table, the paper with the salary offer still in front of him. It represented more than just financial security. It was a chance to rebuild a part of himself he had set aside when Lily came into his life. The architectural aspirations, the creativity, the satisfaction of seeing a design come to fruition. His phone buzzed again. This time, instead of ignoring it, Jackson picked up. "Hello, Olivia." There was a brief pause, as if his direct greeting had caught her off guard. "You knew it was me." "Not too many people call at 9:30 at night," Jackson replied, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Lily. "I've been trying to reach you all day," Olivia said, a hint of accusation in her tone. "I was resting, doctor's orders." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. "What do you want, Olivia?" Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its edge. "I'd like to see Lily properly, not just a glimpse as we pass on the street." Jackson closed his eyes, suddenly weary. "I don't think that's a good idea right now." "She's my daughter too," Olivia reminded him, an undercurrent of steel in her voice. "Biologically, yes," Jackson conceded. "But you've been absent for 4 years, Olivia. You can't just drop back into her life like nothing happened. That's not fair. I didn't know she existed." "And whose fault is that?" The words escaped before Jackson could stop them, years of bottled resentment lending them a sharpness he hadn't intended. Silence stretched between them, taut and uncomfortable. Finally, Olivia sighed. "I didn't call to argue, Jackson. I just want a chance. To meet her. To get to know her." Despite himself, Jackson felt a pang of sympathy. He tried to imagine how he would feel in her position, suddenly discovering he had a child, one who had been growing and changing without him for years. "Let me think about it," he said finally. "Lily's been through a lot in the past couple of days. We all have. I need to make sure whatever happens is in her best interest." It was a reasonable response, but Jackson could sense Olivia's frustration through the phone. She had never been good at waiting, at letting things unfold at their own pace. Everything, in her world, operated on deadlines and schedules. "How long will you be in town?" he asked, changing tack. "At least another week," Olivia replied, some of the tension leaving her voice. "Possibly longer, depending on how the project develops." "I'll call you," Jackson promised. "But I need a few days, Olivia. This isn't something we can rush." After they hung up, Jackson sat for a long time in the darkened apartment, Mason's offer in one hand, his phone in the other. Two paths stretching before him, each with its own promises and complications. The timing couldn't be coincidental. He thought again. Life rarely arranged itself with such perfect irony. 3 days later, Jackson stood outside the Riverbrook Inn, his stomach a knot of apprehension. He had left Lily with Mrs. Winters, explaining only that he had an important meeting. The burns on his hands were healing well enough that he had been able to remove most of the bandages, though the new pink skin remained tender. Room 212. Olivia's room. He had agreed to meet her here rather than at the apartment, wanting to keep this conversation separate from Lily's space until he was certain of the path forward. Before he could knock, the door opened, revealing Olivia in casual business attire, dark slacks and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. The effect was professional but approachable, a deliberate choice that Jackson recognized from their past. Olivia had always been calculated in her presentation. "You came," she said, stepping back to allow him inside. There was relief in her voice, as if she had half expected him to change his mind. The hotel room was standard upscale fare, neutral decor, a desk with a laptop open to spreadsheets, a king-sized bed with crisp linens. Olivia had added her own touches, a sleek coffee maker instead of the room's standard offering, a framed photo on the nightstand that Jackson couldn't quite see, a carefully arranged selection of documents on the desk. "Can I get you anything?" she asked, gesturing to the coffee maker. "Water? Coffee?" Jackson shook his head, remaining standing even as Olivia perched on the edge of the desk chair. "I think we should be direct with each other, Olivia, about what happens next." Olivia nodded, her expression turning serious. "All right, I'll start. I want to be part of Lily's life. I understand that I can't just walk in and claim a role I haven't earned, but I want a chance to know her, to let her know me." "And then what?" Jackson challenged quietly. "You go back to San Francisco in a week or two and we do what? Weekend visits when your schedule allows, holiday phone calls. I won't set Lily up for that kind of disappointment." A flash of hurt crossed Olivia's face. "You think I'd abandon her now that I know she exists?" "I think your life is 3,000 miles away," Jackson replied evenly. "Your career, your home, everything you chose over what we were building here." Olivia rose from the chair, pacing to the window before turning back to face him. "That's not fair, and you know it. I didn't choose my career over our family, Jackson. I chose an opportunity that could have been good for both of us. I asked you to come with me. 3 days before you left," Jackson reminded her, "after you had already signed the contract, already arranged for an apartment, you presented me with a fait accompli, Olivia. not a choice we made together. Olivia's shoulders slumped slightly, the defensive posture fading. "You're right," she admitted quietly. "I handled it badly. I was so focused on the opportunity that I didn't give enough thought to what it meant for us. For you." She met his gaze directly. "I'm sorry for that. Truly." The simple apology, offered without qualifications or excuses, caught Jackson off guard. The Olivia he remembered had rarely admitted fault so plainly. "But that doesn't change the fact that I'm Lily's mother," she continued, her voice strengthening. "Biologically, yes, but also in all the ways that should matter. I have a right to know her. And more importantly, she has a right to know me." Jackson couldn't argue with that logic, much as part of him wanted to. Lily did have a right to know where she came from, who she came from. He had always intended to tell her the truth when she was old enough to understand it. He just hadn't expected that truth to walk back into their lives quite so dramatically. "I've been thinking about that," he said, moving to sit on the edge of the bed, suddenly needing the support, "about what's best for Lily in all of this." Olivia remained silent, waiting. It was a technique she had always employed effectively, creating space for others to fill with words, often revealing more than they intended. "She deserves stability," Jackson continued. "A consistent presence in her life, not someone who floats in and out according to a business schedule." He held up a hand when Olivia started to protest. "Let me finish. I'm not saying you do that intentionally, but the reality is, your life is in California. Your career, your home, everything that matters to you." "Not everything," Olivia countered softly. "Not anymore." Jackson pressed on, determined to make his point. "If you're serious about being in Lily's life, it can't be halfway. She's at an age where attachments form quickly and deeply. If you come into her world only to disappear again, it will hurt her in ways I'm not willing to risk." "So what are you saying?" Olivia asked, a note of tension returning to her voice. "That I have to choose between my career and my daughter? Because that seems like an unfair ultimatum, Jackson." "No," Jackson replied, surprising himself with the clarity of his own thinking. "I'm saying we need a plan, something more substantial than good intentions. Lily needs to know she can count on both of us to be there for her consistently." Olivia's expression softened slightly. "What kind of plan did you have in mind?" Jackson took a deep breath. "Mason, my boss at the woodworking shop, offered me a partnership yesterday. Junior partner at first, with the opportunity to take over when he retires. It would mean stability for Lily, a future here in Riverbrook." "That's wonderful," Olivia said, seeming genuinely pleased. "You deserve it, Jackson. You've always been talented." "The point is," Jackson continued, "I'm putting down roots here, building something for Lily's future. If you want to be part of that future, we need to find a way to make it work with the reality of our separate lives." Olivia was quiet for a moment, her analytical mind visibly working through the implications. "What if it didn't have to be separate?" she asked finally. "What if there was a way to align our paths again?" Jackson frowned, not following. "What do you mean?" "The textile factory project," Olivia explained, moving to the desk and picking up one of the folders. "It's significant. If approved, Chen Innovations would be establishing a major tech campus here. Someone would need to oversee the development, the integration with the local community." She paused, meeting his gaze directly. "It could be me." Jackson stared at her, unsure if he was understanding correctly. "You'd relocate to Riverbrook? Leave San Francisco?" "Not immediately," Olivia clarified. "The project would take time to approve, to fund. But yes, eventually, I could establish a regional office here." She shrugged slightly, as if the idea were perfectly reasonable. The company's been looking to expand its East Coast presence anyway. The casualness with which she proposed upending Her entire life was so characteristic of Olivia that Jackson almost laughed. She had always been able to recalibrate quickly, to see paths others missed. It was what had made her such a successful executive and such a challenging partner. "You do that?" he asked, skepticism evident in his voice. "Give up the corner, office, the urban lifestyle, everything you've built there." "I wouldn't be giving up my career," Olivia corrected him. "Just redirecting it. And yes, I would do that. For Lily." She hesitated, then added more softly, "And maybe for other reasons too." The implication hung in the air between them, unaddressed but unmistakable. "This isn't about us, Olivia," Jackson said firmly. "Whatever was between us ended 4 years ago. This is about Lily." "Of course," Olivia agreed quickly, though something flickered in her eyes that suggested the matter wasn't entirely settled for her. "But the point is, there could be a way forward that allows me to be a consistent presence in her life, not just phone calls and holiday visits." Jackson considered this, trying to separate his emotional response to the idea of Olivia returning permanently from the practical implications for Lily. Could it work? Could they forge some kind of co-parenting relationship from the ashes of their past? And was he ready to share Lily after 4 years of being her only parent? "I need time to think about this," he said finally. "It's a lot to process." Olivia nodded, setting the folder back on the desk. "Of course, but there's one more thing we need to discuss." She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself. "When and how do we tell Lily who I am?" It was the question Jackson had been dreading, the one with no easy answer. Lily was perceptive for her age, curious about the world and the people in it. She had asked about her mother before, in the innocent way of children who notice that their family looks different from others. He had always responded with simple, age-appropriate explanations. Her mother couldn't be with them, but loved her very much. It had been enough until now. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "I'm not sure she's old enough to understand the full situation." "She doesn't need to understand everything right away," Olivia pointed out gently. "Just that I'm her mother and that I'm here now." She hesitated, then added, "I brought something to show you." She crossed to the nightstand and picked up the framed photo Jackson had noticed earlier. When she handed it to him, he felt a jolt of recognition. It was from their time in Chicago, a candid shot taken at the lakefront. They were laughing, his arm around her shoulders, her hand on his chest, both looking younger, more carefree than seemed possible now. "I've kept this all these years," Olivia said quietly. "It was the only thing of ours I took when I left." Jackson stared at the photo, memories flooding back. The day at the lake, the plans they had made, the future that had seemed so certain then. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to understand something," Olivia replied, her voice steady but vulnerable in a way he had rarely heard. "What we had wasn't nothing, Jackson. It wasn't something I threw away lightly. I made a mistake in how I handled things, and I've had 4 years to regret it." She took the photo from his hands, looking at it briefly before setting it aside. "I'm not asking for a second chance with you. I'm just asking for a first chance with my daughter." Something in her sincerity reached past Jackson's defenses. Whatever else had happened between them, whatever mistakes they had both made, one undeniable fact was that Lily deserved to know her mother, and Olivia deserved the chance to know her daughter. "Tomorrow," he said finally, "come to the apartment around noon. We'll tell her together and see where things go from there. But we take it slow, Olivia. No promises about the future until we see how Lily handles the present." The relief on Olivia's face was palpable. "Thank you, Jackson. I promise I'll follow your lead on this. Lily's well-being comes first." As Jackson left the hotel, the evening air crisp against his face, he felt as if he were standing on the edge of a precipice. Behind him lay the carefully constructed life he had built for himself and Lily. Simple, stable, predictable. Ahead stretched the unknown territory of shared parenthood with a woman who had once meant everything to him, and now was little more than a complicated stranger. Tomorrow would change everything. For all of them. The next morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight spilling through the apartment windows as Jackson prepared breakfast with hands that weren't entirely steady. He had slept poorly, his dreams filled with fragments of the past and anxieties about the future. Lily, by contrast, was in high spirits, chattering excitedly about the fairy garden she and Rachel had started to assemble the previous day. "And Rachel says we can plant real tiny flowers in it next week," she explained, waving her spoon for emphasis. "Ones that are special for fairies because they're so small." Jackson nodded, forcing himself to focus on her enthusiasm rather than the clock ticking inexorably toward noon. "That sounds wonderful, sweet pea. You'll have to show me when they bloom." "I will," Lily promised solemnly, before tilting her head in the way she did when a new thought occurred to her. "Daddy, are we doing something special today? You've been making breakfast for a long time." Jackson glanced down at the pancakes he had been methodically preparing, a stack far too large for just the two of them. "Actually, yes," he said, seizing the opening she had provided. "We're having a visitor for lunch, someone important." Lily's eyes widened with interest. "Who? Is it Emma and Olivia, or Rachel and Toby?" "No, sweetheart, it's..." Jackson hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's someone I used to know, a long time ago. Someone who knew you when you were just a tiny baby." Lily considered. This, her small face serious. "Like Greta. She says she knew me when I was just a little peanut." Jackson smiled despite his nerves. "Sort of like that, yes. But this person, she knew you even before that." Before Lily could ask more questions, there was a knock at the door. Jackson glanced at the clock. 11:45. Olivia punctual as always. "That might be her now," he said, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Why don't you go wash up, and I'll see who it is." As Lily skipped off to the bathroom, Jackson took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Then he crossed to the door and opened it. Olivia stood on the landing, dressed simply in jeans and a soft sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger this way, more like the woman he had fallen in love with, and less like the executive who had walked away. In her hands, she held a carefully wrapped package. "You're early," Jackson observed, stepping back to let her in. "I was nervous," Olivia admitted, a vulnerability in her voice that seemed out of character. "Kept changing my clothes, trying to decide what to wear. Ridiculous, I know." The admission made her seem more human, less the calculated professional he had built her up to be in his memory. Jackson felt some of his own tension ease slightly. "She's washing up," he said, closing the door behind her. "I told her we're having an important visitor, someone who knew her when she was a baby. Nothing more specific yet." Olivia nodded, her gaze taking in the small apartment. The kitchenette with its stack of pancakes, the worn but clean furniture, the wall with its painted tree mural. Her eyes lingered on the array of Lily's drawings stuck to the refrigerator, each one a colorful glimpse into their daughter's imagination. "It's nice," she said softly. "Cozy. It feels like a home." Before Jackson could respond, the bathroom door opened and Lily emerged, her face and hands freshly washed, her dark curls somewhat tamed by what appeared to have been an attempt at brushing. She stopped short when she saw Olivia, her eyes widening with recognition. "You're the lady from downstairs," she said. "The one with the fancy shoes." Olivia laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and delight. "I am, though I left the fancy shoes at the hotel today." She knelt down to Lily's level, her movements careful, as if approaching a wild animal she didn't want to startle. "My name is Olivia. It's very nice to meet you properly, Lily. Lily studied her with the direct curiosity of childhood. You know my name? I do, Olivia confirmed, glancing briefly at Jackson before continuing. I know a few things about you, actually. I know you're 4 years old, I know you love to draw, and I know you have a very special daddy who takes excellent care of you. Lily nodded, accepting this assessment. He does. He saved Emma and Olivia from the fire. She paused, making a connection. You have the same name as my friend. I noticed that, Olivia replied with a smile. It's a pretty name, isn't it? Another nod from Lily. Then, with the abrupt shift in focus typical of young children, she pointed to the package Olivia was still holding. Is that for me? Lily, Jackson interjected gently. Remember our manners. It's all right, Olivia assured him, her eyes never leaving Lily's face. Yes, it is for you. Would you like to open it? As Lily eagerly accepted the package, Jackson moved to the kitchenette, giving them a moment while he arranged the pancakes on a serving plate. He could hear Lily's delighted exclamation as she unwrapped what appeared to be a book, followed by Olivia's soft explanation of its contents. It's a special book about a little girl and her adventures, Olivia was saying. My mother used to read it to me when I was your age, and I thought maybe we could read it together sometime. There was a question in her voice, an uncertainty, that tugged at something in Jackson's chest. For all her professional confidence, Olivia was navigating uncharted waters here, just as he was. Daddy, look, Lily called, holding up the book, a beautifully illustrated children's story with a burgundy cloth cover. It has my name in it. Jackson moved closer, seeing that, indeed, the character on the cover bore the name Lily in flowing script. Beneath her image, that's wonderful, sweet pea. What do you say to Ms. Olivia? Lily looked up at Olivia with a beaming smile. Thank you. Can we read it now, please? How about after lunch? Jackson suggested, noting the time. The pancakes are getting cold. As they settled around the small kitchen table, Jackson felt a surreal sense of domesticity. Here they were, the three of them, sharing a meal as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Lily, oblivious to the undercurrents, happily drizzled syrup over her pancakes while chattering about her fairy garden plans. Olivia listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than adult condescension. It was only when the meal was nearly finished that Jackson caught Olivia's eye, a silent communication passing between them. It was time. Lily, he began carefully, setting down his fork. Remember how I said Ms. Olivia knew you when you were a baby? There's something special about that, something important that we want to tell you. Lily looked between them, her expression curious but not concerned. What is it? Jackson took a deep breath. Ms. Olivia is... She's your mother, Lily. Your biological mother. That means she's the one who brought you into the world, who carried you before you were born. Lily's eyes widened, her gaze fixing on Olivia with new understanding. You're my mom? She asked, her voice small but clear. Olivia nodded, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. Yes, Lily, I am. Time seemed to stand still in the small apartment as Lily processed the revelation. Her gaze shifted from Olivia to Jackson and back again, her young mind visibly working through this new information. The adults remained silent, allowing her the space to absorb what she had just learned. But, Lily said finally, her brow furrowed in confusion, where have you been? Daddy said my mom couldn't be with us. The simple question, carried the weight of 4 years of absence. And Jackson saw Olivia flinch slightly before composing herself. This was the moment that would define everything that followed. The explanation that would form the foundation of whatever relationship might develop between mother and daughter. "I've been far away," Olivia began gently, choosing her words with obvious care. "In a city called San Francisco, all the way on the other side of the country. I didn't know you were here, Lily. If I had, I would have come much sooner." Lily tilted her head, considering this. "You didn't know about me?" "No, sweetheart, I didn't," Olivia confirmed, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. We get confused or scared, and we don't always do the right thing. Your daddy and we lost touch with each other before I knew you were going to be born." Jackson watched the exchange closely, ready to intervene if needed, but Olivia was handling the explanation with a sensitivity he hadn't expected. She wasn't placing blame, wasn't sharing details that would be too complex for a 4-year-old to understand. Instead, she was offering a simple truth that acknowledged the reality without burdening Lily with adult complexities. "But now you..." "No?" Lily asked, her natural curiosity pushing her forward despite the emotional weight of the conversation. Olivia smiled, a genuine expression that softened her entire face. "Now I know, and I'm so happy to finally meet you." Lily seemed to accept this, though Jackson could see her still processing, trying to fit this new piece into the puzzle of her young life. After a moment, she asked the question that Jackson had been dreading. "Are you going to stay now, or do you have to go back to San Fran?" "San Francisco," Olivia supplied gently. She glanced at Jackson, a silent request for guidance. They hadn't discussed how much to share about future plans, how much to promise a child who had no concept of the complexities involved. "Olivia is here for work right now," Jackson explained, stepping in. "She'll be in Riverbrook for a little while. After that, we're still figuring things out, but the important thing is that she wanted to meet you, to let you know who she is." Lily absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. Then, with the remarkable adaptability of children, she simply nodded and returned her attention to the book Olivia had brought. "Can we read this now, since lunch is over?" Relief washed over both adults at the simple, practical request. Whatever complicated emotions might surface later, for now, Lily seemed content with the explanation she had been given and ready to move forward in her straightforward, childlike way. "I'd love to read with you," Olivia said, her voice warm. "Shall we sit on the sofa?" As Lily led Olivia to the living room area, book clutched carefully in her small hands, Jackson began clearing the lunch dishes, needing a moment to gather his thoughts. The revelation had gone more smoothly than he had feared, but he knew this was just the beginning. Children processed major life changes in stages, often circling back with new questions and concerns as they integrated new realities into their understanding of the world. From the living room came the sound of Olivia's voice, gentle and expressive, as she read the story. Lily had curled up beside her on the sofa, not quite touching, but close enough that Jackson could see the tentative beginnings of a connection forming. It was surreal, watching the two of them together, seeing the similarities in their mannerisms that he had never fully acknowledged before. The way they both leaned forward slightly when concentrating, the identical tilt of their heads when something caught their interest. The afternoon passed in a strange dance of awkward moments and surprising connections. Lily, with the resilience of childhood, seemed to take the revelation in stride, treating Olivia with a mixture of curiosity and cautious warmth. She proudly showed off her fairy garden project, a collection of crayon drawings, the mural on her bedroom wall. Olivia responded with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was paying attention, sharing small anecdotes about her own childhood that drew quiet laughs from Lily. By the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the apartment floor, a tentative rhythm had established itself. Not comfort exactly, but a kind of cautious harmony as the three of them navigated this new dynamic. "I should go," Olivia said finally, glancing at her watch. "I have some work calls to make this evening." Lily, who had been showing Olivia her favorite stuffed animals, looked up with a hint of disappointment. "Will you come back tomorrow?" The question hung in the air, simple yet loaded with implications. Olivia looked to Jackson, deferring to his judgment. "Maybe not tomorrow," Jackson said carefully. "Olivia has work and you have school, but perhaps the day after. We could meet at the park if the weather's nice." Lily considered this, then nodded her acceptance. "Okay, but you promise to come back?" This was directed at Olivia, a child's need for reassurance evident in her voice. "I promise," Olivia said firmly, meeting Lily's gaze directly. "I'll always come back." The weight of that promise wasn't lost on Jackson. It was the kind of absolute that children understood and adults struggled to fulfill. But he saw the commitment in Olivia's eyes, a determination that suggested she fully intended to keep her word, whatever it might take. After Olivia had gone, with a somewhat awkward goodbye that included a hesitant hug from Lily, Jackson found himself mentally exhausted. The emotional toll of the day, of seeing his daughter and her mother together for the first time, of navigating the complex feelings that stirred in him, had left him drained. Lily, however, seemed energized. As Jackson prepared a simple dinner, she chattered away, moving between topics with the natural fluidity of childhood. Olivia's visit was mentioned, but no more prominently than the fairy garden or a funny thing that had happened at school the previous week. For Lily, it seemed, the revelation was simply another part of her expanding world, significant but not earth-shattering. It wasn't until bedtime, as Jackson tucked her in beneath the glow-in-the-dark stars that dotted her ceiling, that Lily returned to the subject. "Daddy," she said softly, her eyes serious in the dim light, "did you know my mom was going to come find us?" Jackson settled on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "No, sweet pea. It was a surprise to me, too." Lily nodded, processing this. "She's pretty," she observed after a moment, "and she reads stories good. Different voices and everything." "She does," Jackson agreed, a bittersweet feeling rising in his chest. Olivia had always been an animated storyteller, a trait he had forgotten until today. "Do you think—" Lily hesitated, suddenly uncharacteristically shy. "Do you think she likes me?" The vulnerability in the question broke Jackson's heart. For all her adaptability, her seemingly easy acceptance of the day's revelations, Lily was still processing the implications, still seeking reassurance that this new and important person in her life saw value in her. "Oh, Lily," Jackson said gently, brushing a curl from her forehead. "She absolutely adores you. How could she not? You're the most amazing little girl in the world." Lily smiled at this, comforted by the familiar affirmation. "I think I like her too," she confided, as if sharing a secret. "But I still love you." "The most, Daddy. And I love you the most," Jackson replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "That will never, ever change." As Lily drifted off to sleep, Jackson remained seated on the edge of her bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. The day had gone better than he could have hoped, yet he couldn't shake a lingering unease. Olivia had been perfect. Today, patient, attentive, genuinely interested in Lily's world. But how long would it last? How long before the demands of her high-powered career pulled her focus away? How long before Lily experienced the pain of disappointment that Jackson had hoped to shield her from? The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Jackson was just finishing breakfast preparations when a knock sounded at the door. Opening it, he found Monica Madison standing on the landing, a basket in her hands, and Emma and Olivia behind. Her nearly identical in matching blue coats, Good morning, Monica greeted him with a warm smile. I hope we're not too early. The girls insisted on bringing these muffins over before school. Before Jackson could respond, Lily appeared at his side, her face lighting up at the sight of her friends. Emma, Olivia, come see my fairy garden. It has real tiny plants now. The twins glanced at their mother, who nodded permission before following Lily into the apartment, their excited chatter filling the small space. Monica handed the basket to Jackson with an apologetic smile. I hope it's all right dropping in like this. The girls have been talking non-stop about Lily since they got home from the hospital. And of course, they're still completely starstruck by you. Jackson accepted the basket, the fresh scent of baked goods wafting up. It's fine, really. Lily's been asking to have them over. Though I should warn you, our place isn't exactly set up for play dates. Monica waved away his concern, following him into the apartment. Oh, please, you should see the state of our temporary apartment. The fire damage is being repaired, but we'll be in the extended stay hotel for at least another month. Her expression grew serious. Which reminds me, I wanted to talk to you about something, if you have a moment. While the girls were occupied with examining the fairy garden, Monica lowered her voice. The insurance adjuster came by yesterday. Between the coverage and some savings, we'll be able to get back on our feet. But I wanted to do something more substantial to thank you for what you did. Jackson shook his head, uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. That's really not necessary. Please, Monica interjected gently. If you hadn't gone into that building when you did, I would have lost my daughters. There's no way to repay that kind of debt, but I'd like to try. She reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope. My late husband's life insurance policy. I've been holding onto it for the girls' education, but I'd like to offer you a portion of it to help with Lily's future, or your business, or whatever you might need. Stunned, Jackson automatically took the envelope but immediately tried to hand it back. Monica, I can't accept this. What you're going through, rebuilding after the fire, you need this money for your family. Monica's expression was resolute. We're stable, Jackson. The insurance will cover the repairs, and I have a good job. This is something I need to do, not just for you, but for myself, for my peace of mind. She gently pushed the envelope back toward him. At least think about it, for Lily's sake, if not your own. Before Jackson could formulate a response, the door opened again and Mrs. Winters appeared, ready to escort Lily to school. The arrival set off a flurry of activity. Coats being put on, lunchboxes gathered, promises made about future playdates. In the bustle, the envelope somehow found its way into Jackson's pocket. The conversation with Monica suspended but not forgotten. As the apartment emptied, leaving Jackson alone with his thoughts, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Olivia. Meeting with town council today, factory project. Dinner tonight? Would like to discuss next steps, Lily, and us. The last two words sent a jolt through him. Us. It was a loaded term, especially coming from Olivia. What exactly did she mean by it? The possibility that had been hovering at the edges of his consciousness since her return, that her interest might extend beyond reconnecting with Lily to rekindling something with him, suddenly seemed more concrete. Before he could overthink it, Jackson typed a simple reply: dinner at 7, Greta's Diner. It was public enough to keep the conversation focused, familiar enough to feel comfortable. And Greta would be there, a grounding presence if things became too complicated. The day passed in a blur of activity. Jackson spent the morning at the woodworking shop with Mason, discussing the partnership offer and examining the blueprints for the expanded space. Despite his bandaged hands, he found himself sketching design ideas, the old architectural instincts resurfacing as if they had never been dormant. That's what I'm talking about, Mason said approvingly, looking over Jackson's shoulder at a concept for custom built-ins that would maximize the usable space while maintaining the shop's character. You've got the eye, Jack. Always did. In the afternoon, Jackson met with the bank about a small business loan, the first step toward accepting Mason's partnership offer. The meeting went better than expected, the loan officer expressing confidence in the business plan Mason had prepared and noting Jackson's history of reliability with previous smaller loans. By the time evening approached, Jackson found himself standing at a crossroads, both literally and figuratively. He stood on the corner of Main Street, looking toward Greta's diner where Olivia would be waiting. In his pocket was Monica's envelope, still unopened. In his mind were visions of possibilities, the expanded woodworking shop, Lily's future, and now, improbably, Olivia's potential return to Riverbrook. For 4 years, he had lived in a holding pattern, focused solely on providing for Lily, setting aside his own ambitions and desires. Now, suddenly, paths were opening in all directions, opportunities and complications intertwining in ways he couldn't have predicted. As he pushed open the door to the diner, the familiar bell jingling overhead, Jackson caught sight of Olivia sitting in a booth by the window. She was dressed more casually than he was used to seeing her, in jeans and a simple blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. In the warm light of the diner, she looked almost like the woman he had fallen in love with years ago, before ambition and disagreement had driven them apart. She looked up as he approached, a smile curving her lips. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi," Jackson replied, sliding into the booth across from her. For a moment neither spoke, the weight of their shared past and uncertain future hanging between them. Then Greta appeared, coffee pot in hand, a knowing smile on her face. "Well, well," she said, filling their cups without being asked. "Isn't this a sight for sore eyes? You two catching up on old times?" Jackson felt a flush rise to his cheeks, but Olivia answered smoothly, "Something like that, Greta. And also making plans for new ones." The simple statement carried layers of meaning that Jackson wasn't sure he was ready to explore, but as Greta moved away, promising to return for their orders, he found himself looking at Olivia with new eyes, not just as Lily's mother, not just as the woman who had once broken his heart, but as a person in her own right, complex, flawed, but perhaps more capable of growth and change than he had given her credit for. "So," he said, taking a sip of his coffee, "you wanted to talk about next steps?" Olivia nodded, her expression turning serious. "I met with the town council today about the factory project. It's moving forward faster than expected. There's strong support for the tech campus idea, especially with the promise of local jobs and economic development." "That's good news for Riverbrook," Jackson acknowledged. "The town could use the boost." "It's also good news for us," Olivia continued, leaning forward slightly. "For Lily, it means I'll be spending more time here, overseeing the initial phases, at least the next few months." Jackson absorbed this, the implications settling in. His mind, and after that? What happens when the project moves to the next phase, or when something more important comes up at headquarters? Instead of bristling at the implied criticism, Olivia met his gaze steadily. "I've been thinking about that a lot, about what matters most." She took a deep breath, as if steadying herself. "I've spoken with the board about establishing a permanent regional office here, with me as the director." The statement hung in the air between them, its significance impossible to miss. "You're serious about this?" Jackson said, not quite a question. "Completely," Olivia confirmed. "Seeing Lily yesterday." "Jackson, I know I can't make up for 4 years of absence. I know I can't just walk into her life and expect everything to be perfect. But I want to try. I want to be here, to be part of her world, to watch her grow up." She paused, then added more softly, "And maybe in time to see if there's still something worth rebuilding between us two." There it was, the possibility that had been hovering unspoken. Jackson felt a complex surge of emotions: caution, hope, lingering anger, and a treacherous warmth that he had thought long extinguished. "That's a lot to process," he said finally, buying time to sort through his own feelings. "I know," Olivia acknowledged, "and I'm not asking for an answer tonight, just for you to consider the possibility, to leave the door open, even just a crack." Before Jackson could respond, the diner door opened with a bang, and Mason burst, in his face flushed with excitement. "Jack!" he called, spotting them immediately. "You're not going to believe this." As Mason approached their booth, waving a newspaper in one hand, Jackson saw Olivia's expression shift, closing off slightly at the interruption. Whatever moment had been building between them was broken, at least temporarily. "Sorry to interrupt." "Your dinner," Mason said, not sounding particularly sorry. "But this couldn't wait. The town council approved the zoning change for the new shop location." "That's great news," Jackson said, genuinely pleased despite the awkward timing. "I thought that was weeks away from a decision." Mason glanced at Olivia, a knowing gleam in his eye. "Seems someone put in a good word with the council today. Something about the economic development benefits of supporting local craftsmanship alongside new industry." He nodded toward Olivia. "Wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you, Miss Chen?" Olivia's smile was small but significant. "I might have mentioned that successful communities need a balance of traditional craftsmanship and new technology. That the charm of places like Carpenter's Corner is as much a part of Riverbrook's appeal as any tech campus could be." The realization that Olivia had used her influence to help advance the woodworking shop's expansion, to help him, struck Jackson forcefully. It wasn't just words or promises. It was concrete action aimed at building a future in Riverbrook that could include all of them. As Mason continued excitedly outlining the implications of the zoning approval, Jackson found himself studying Olivia with new appreciation. The woman sitting across from him wasn't just the career-focused executive who had walked away 4 years ago. She was someone who had learned from her mistakes, who was making choices now with a broader perspective on what truly mattered. Perhaps, he thought, there was something worth rebuilding after all, not just for Lily's sake, but for their own as well. 6 months later, the expanded Carpenter's Corner celebrated its grand opening. Jackson stood proudly beside Mason, watching, as Riverbrook residents admired the custom furniture displays. Through the front windows, the old textile factory was visible, its transformation into the Chen Innovations Tech Campus well underway. "Daddy, look!" Lily called, racing toward him with Emma and Olivia Madison in tow. "We made friendship bracelets at the craft table." Jackson knelt to admire their handiwork, his heart full as he watched his daughter flourish. The sound of familiar footsteps made him look up to see Olivia approaching, her smile warm as she joined their circle. "The mayor just arrived," she said, her hand naturally finding Jackson's shoulder. The simple touch no longer felt strange. Over these months, tentative connection had blossomed into something deeper, stronger than before. Later that evening, as stars appeared over Riverbrook, Jackson and Olivia walked hand in hand behind Lily as she skipped toward their new home. A modest house with a real backyard where a treehouse was under construction. "Happy?" Olivia asked, her voice soft in the twilight. Jackson nodded, watching their daughter dance ahead. From the ashes of tragedy had risen something beautiful, a family rewritten, stronger at the broken places. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.